Hey everyone, Twins34 here. This is my second video on my web series on how to set up the different game modes in OOTP 25. So today I am going to tackle the historical game. I'm not going to use challenge mode, and we're going to go straight with the wizard. I am going to go over the different modes here just to clarify a lot of different things out of them. Default mode. This mode is close to historical. It uses recalc to recalculate your players every year and make sure that they are playing the way they did during the years they played. It does not use any of the historical transactions. The draft is all open. Anybody can be drafted to any different team. You can trade. You can do pretty much anything except for there's no development. So you will not have development lab, you won't have development sliders. All of that is disabled because you're not using the development system. So if you want to have something that's close to historical with a little bit of differences with where players play, then default mode is pretty decent. Replay mode. This mode is pretty much 100% hands off. There's no trading, there's no draft. Players come into the teams that they were drafted by. It is recalc once again, so the players are recalculated every year. Players that missed years miss years, so anybody that went to World War II, World War One, Vietnam, so on and so forth. If they were injured for a year or so, those players will miss years and they will not show up in the years that they are injured or off to war. So pretty much this mode is completely hands off. You pretty much just watch what happens, and it's going to be pretty close to historical. The teams are not going to, the Yankees aren't going to win all the World Series that they won. That stuff will all be randomized, but this will play as close to historical as you possibly can get. Career mode. This is my favorite mode. This is I get to replay pretty much a fictional historical world. I have all of the historical players. They come in, get drafted. I can trade, um, and they will develop. That uses development system. You can use the development lab. You get to use development sliders. All of that is activated in this mode. Um, so it's kind of the one I like the most, and it is the one I'm going to set up because it's the one I know the most. Random debut is a little bit of an oddball. There are a lot of issues with it. Um, you have to play this with both recalc and development on, which makes for a little bit of a mess with players. Um, there's just a lot of things that do still need to be fixed in this mode. It has been worked on quite a bit this year, but I wouldn't really recommend to use this as it's going to give you a lot of headaches unless you know the ins and outs of OOTP. Um, Over here, you get to select your seasons. You can start at the very beginning of when baseball started, or you can pick any of the different eras. Me, I am kind of a baseball boom type guy. I like to usually start in 61, 70. I might start in the 80, but we'll just start in 70. Got career mode on, and we'll just go to the next step. So it shows you that OOTP development engine is on. It has the amateur draft. Um, this right here is important. The minor leagues. If you unclick this and click use fictional minor leagues, your players are not going to come in when they were actually drafted. So with this selected, you can go look at historical drafts and see when players were drafted. And when this is on, they will come in on those dates. If you click use fictional or no minor leagues, players will debut when they debuted in the MLB. That is the biggest difference out of these two options right here. If you want players to come in as rookies, make sure to keep real minor leagues on. I keep them on. It is kind of a pain because, every year teams are going to affiliate with different teams. You do not lose your players, but you'll get different teams. So that's the only headache with it, but it's historical. So if you are deep in historical, keep the import real minor leagues on because it is going to help with your draft as well. It's not going to give you players coming in like, Vita Blue in 1969 when he was actually drafted in 1966. So let's go on to the next step as I'm not going to change any of these. Here, you can skip a few pages once you get into the game. I'm going to select my 80 to 20. I am going to turn scouting off as I do not use scouting in historical leagues. I already know the players that are coming in. If I don't, I might have already researched it by looking at drafts and seeing who was good during those drafts. OOTP follows those drafts. The players who are going to be good are rated good. So there's absolutely no reason to hide it because you already know what players are going to be like. Don't touch anything with the players' pictures or anything. Um, if you don't want to have minor league pitchers on, you can just click major. But I just keep all players on. Face gen, color mode. You can either have sepia, black and white, or normal. I leave it on normal. And then I click on the next step, and it'll start loading the game. We'll just call this YouTube Historical. Autosave, you can do that right here. You can switch it to once a month, once a week, whichever you like. I will put in playing commissioner mode. And that's all I do on here. I'm going to hit next step. Game is going to start to load. And I will see you once we're picking our team. All right, we are on the team selection page. I'm picking my Twins. I'm going to click start game. And it's going to do a little bit of recalculating and setting up what is left of the league. And we are in. So, just like with my other tutorial that I had prior to this one about the standard games, we're going to go underneath game and game settings. Now, we already set up most of this. I am going to turn off the coach sniping as I hate those. I disable the owner goals, and I also turn off storylines. Why turn off storylines? Well, especially in historical leagues, with storylines on, you might go off and draft a first round pick, and all of a sudden, oh, I decide I'm going to go play football. Well, that did not historically happen. So I don't want that to happen. I also don't want my players to go speak with the guru and all of a sudden become flops after they're already all stars. So storylines I just disable just because I kind of find them a nuisance. In one of the leagues I'm in, I actually had a starting pitcher, my ace pitcher, in the middle of the league, work on putting a TV on a shelf. And his ladder, he slipped off his ladder, and the TV ended up hitting him in the head, giving him a concussion for 4 to 6 months. And because of that, I just do not like storylines. So I definitely always disable storylines. Um, Nothing else is going to change with the coaches, players, and teams. Um, I leave these to his where they have them in historical. I ain't going to change them. Fatigue is going to stay the same. I'm going to turn this off, of course, as and I don't like the delayed injury diagnosis. If you do, hey, I am not going to tell you you can't have it on. It's your game. I just don't like using it. Once again, over here, I'm going to put in my numbers. In historical, I put 900. And I still use 1.1. So 0.900, 1.1. So what do these numbers mean, right? I know I didn't explain this in my first video, and I thought about that. I should explain what these numbers mean. So the aging speeds, I'm slowing down their aging just a little bit so that they don't start dropping off right away. Their aging's a little bit slower. It's going to be at a little bit better pace than what default's at. Um, and then with the development speed, I'm speeding it up slightly to help combat against the slow development of OOTP 25. The slower development of OOTP 25 has been a hot topic for quite a few months. The devs have, improved on it, but a lot of players still feel that development is quite slow. So this helps boost it up a little bit. And if you do still find that, 1.1 is too slow, you can bump up those numbers, or you can use this development target age and make it younger so that players develop a little bit faster when they're younger instead of, a little bit older. Right now, default might mean 24 years old, 25 years old, where putting it on younger might mean they'll develop a little bit faster at 21 or 22. I mean, that's just a guess. That's not, you know, knowledge that the devs give. It's just my guess on what the different settings here for much younger, younger, default, older, and much older means. So if you want them to develop a little bit faster, you can go 1.15 or, bump this up to younger. I do keep this at older, just like I do with my standard games. I want players to start to age out once they hit their 30s instead of late 20s. Yes, I do know that players do start to lose around 28 or so, but I mean, you're still going to see a little bit of regression around 28. It's just that most of it now is going to move into the early 30s of like 30 to 32, 33 years old. So that's why I put it on older. And in historic, I knock TCR all the way down to 50. As to me, TCR is not a great feature. The way it was in 24 and before, it was kind of cool. You could have a player just overnight, boom, they've become a superstar. But the way it is now, it is more frequently, but at smaller changes. So you might see a player regressing a lot faster because he's getting hit by TCR more often. So I would never recommend this being up to 200, as it might hurt your players and you might not understand why, but that's just what talent change randomness is. It just hits your players every so often, either bumping them up or bumping them down, and it's going to hit their potential more. So, yes, it might take somebody that's a 40 potential and make them a 60 potential, but it might take somebody that's an 80 potential and turn them into somebody that's a 40 potential. So, I like to turn this down in historic because I don't want all that bouncing around going on. DevLab, just like I stated before, I think the sweet spot is 10 to 12. If you want to have more or less, that is your option. I just give my recommendation on my testing that I find 10 to 12 slots to be pretty much the perfect number. I always turn on my lab specific rating changes for my emails because I want to have those coming in. Base gen in historics, I have pictures of the players, and so I will turn on all players here. My face gen picture search is going to be photo first, and I will have it on demand so that when I look at the player, it's going to load the pictures. The rest of this stuff, I don't touch anything, so we'll go to league settings. Every once in a while, I will schedule a fantasy draft in a historical league just to have a little bit of change on the teams. I find it fun every once in a while just to be able to draft who I want to draft and try to make a team from the inaugural draft, as we'll call it. I find it fun, gives a little bit different flavor for your league. So this is something you can play around with if you want to. Rules. I let all this pretty much go the way the league develops. Spring training roster size, I do still turn this down to like 35. I do like to allow draft pick trading. Once again, I like to change this to 120. And here's the thing about why in historical leagues that the draft's on November 15th. It used to be December 15th in OOTP 24 and before, but in discussions we had with the devs, we had them move it to before free agency. Main reason is this way the draft is done before free agency starts and it will not mess around with your compensation picks. So it is very important that you don't move it into free agency. Otherwise, it can mess up your compensation picks. If you decide to move this to, say, July, just know you're not going to have a draft in July because that draft happened the year before in November. So all the players you think are going to come in are already in your league. So you're not going to get a double draft. So that means your first actual draft will not happen until 1971 in July. Because this November 15th draft right here would be my 1971 draft. Also, the other reason that the devs have for having this draft before the start of the next season and not in July is because there is no international free agency in the historical leagues. So all the international free agents come into the draft and not into an international free agency. So your Pedro Martinez's and Ivan Rodriguez and stuff like that, people that came in through international free agency or were drafted, that way, they're going to come into the draft instead of through international free agency, which is not even, you know, activated in historical leagues. So I actually like to move this to November 1st just to have it pretty much right after the World Series is over. Um, like I said, I'd like to change this from 30 days to 120. Gives you a little more time to kind of look at your players. I mean, you don't have to scout them or anything like that, but at least you get to see them well before the draft happens. From here, financials. Now, I do not like to play with the reserve clause. Free agency didn't start until 1976. So if you want to turn off the reserve clause and have free agency every year, go into financials, scroll down to the bottom on the left hand side, and uncheck the reserve clause rules. This is going to open up free agency. You want to make sure you want to go to where compensation is, and you want to turn this on. I usually play with the 2012 CBA rules. I just seem to like those a little bit better. Um, you can turn on Super 2s. You can keep them off. So, I mean, I just leave it off. I don't need that on. Qualifying offer that will go up as your finances go up or as the league evolves. So you don't have to touch any of this stuff. I like to put this at 20% so that I'm not, cheesing the system by offering tons of team offers and then, giving 10%, but signing them for like, a stupid amount and then I only have to pay very minimal for letting these guys go. So I like to raise this up. Some people like to put it at 50% just to make it so that they don't abuse this system because players and the AI are dumb. So yeah, you might want to bump these up a little bit. Rest of this stuff I do not touch. Options. One thing I did forget to say in the standard one is I do change these. I don't leave Platinum Stick and Great Glove. I do change it to Silver Slugger and Gold Glove. So that's one thing I did forget. I do change those. I like to have them the real name. I'm glad we're able to change it. I don't change anything with my scheduling or the home run stuff. I leave all this the way it is. In here, once in a while, I might put on, or might turn on the amateur draft pool and give myself some free agents from that. I kind of like to have that different flavor, but with scouting off, you don't get to send them to any, you know, training program to scout them out or make them happy with your team. So it's just a little bit of different flavor. I don't recommend it. It's just something I do when I kind of feel bored and want to see different players come in. Historical. In here, I do not touch much of anything. Um, I might uncheck the automatically adjust league strategy when advancing next seasons, just so that, things don't change. And at least that's what I think this does, as there is no explanation on what it actually does. Um, I like to put on AI evaluation for this. And this way, the AI will evaluate players and look at where they play best. So, like, they won't take somebody that's a third baseman who is, a high rated third baseman and stick them over at first. They're going to play them at third instead of sticking them over at first. And there has been a little bit of issue with that in the historical leagues for some reason. But with conversations that have been talked about, this seems to kind of fix that. Don't have to worry about recalculation. Don't have to worry about any of this stuff here. This is all good. Stats and AI. I do move catcher framing up to average, as catchers have always framed, but back in the 70s, it wasn't as much of a big issue as it was in the 2000s to 2020, so on. But I do like to have that catcher framing impact does have a little bit of an impact between balls and strikes. So I do turn that up. Pitcher stamina, I put this to low. Players in the 70s were pitching and completing games. There is no reason that they should not be completing games in the 70s. A lot of pitchers would pitch the whole game. Wasn't until the late 70s that the closer became a big deal, when Rolly Fingers came around and started setting records with the A's. So this I do keep low, and by the 80s I might move it up to normal, but in the 70s it is definitely set at low. And everything else, that is it for this. So that should do it for this video. If you haven't checked out my first video on this web series, make sure to go check out the standard game video and how to set those up. And I will be doing a fictional league in my next video on how I set those up. And that one is quite different than both standard and historical. And there's a lot of different things you can do with these fictional leagues to make them extremely interesting and fun. Please also check out the rest of my videos, like the development sliders and the development program. Lots of good information in there. I do need to update a lot because some things have changed over the course of the year. Um, please like and subscribe, as it does help us YouTubers get more views. And that should do it. If you have any questions, ask them below, and I will try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. And everybody have a great day. Thank you for watching.